after all these years of being dependent on foreign energy sources and wanting to be energy independent, the first thing we do is turn around and export it. How does that make sense without really understanding the consequences for taxpayers, climate, jobs, and related issues? So let me kind of pick up on a couple of issues that I didn't touch on earlier with the first gentleman. If you extract coal on on private land, if you extract coal on private land, that's kind of your business. In other words, you extract it on private land, you have certain opportunities that you wouldn't have if it was on federal land. Federal land, which is what we're talking about here in the Powder River Basin in particular, is the place where the coal is likely to be extracted and shipped out of the Pacific Northwest. That's federal land. In fact, if you go back and look at the laws, the coal is supposed to go to deal with the needs of America. That's the point of it. Now, we're talking about exporting it, and a number of the states, and they have some pretty conservative Republican governors, are raising questions about whether they're being ripped off in terms of royalties, because they're supposed to pay royalties. So in addition to this being an environmental issue, which it obviously is, this is also a hugely important taxpayer issue. And whether, in effect, there's sort of these straw men easy set up to move the sale through so that you really don't get the actual value of what the coal would be in Asia and what is really owed. So I'm very pleased that Senator Murkowski was willing to join me on this issue. And if some of what has been alleged is accurate, and that's the point of the inquiry, taxpayers are being fleeced, and we ought to make sure that that's stopped, and it ought to be factored into any decision with respect to exports. Second, this has huge consequences in terms of climate change. And folks have been calling and saying, all right, Ron, you're going to be on this committee. What are you going to say about climate change? First, I think climate change is a serious problem. I know that there are some that do not. I don't share that view. I think the preponderance of the scientific evidence is, and we saw the numbers for the United States this year, just in the last couple of days, is the globe is getting hotter. That's number one. Number two, these storms are getting more frequent and they're getting more serious. Those two kind of facts, to me, are indisputable. And I think the question becomes then, what can we do about it, particularly in a way that greens up the climate and can help put people to work. And I want folks to know on this committee this year, I'm going to do everything I can to promote a low-carbon economy. So when you turn on, and let's say you're having trouble sleeping at night, and you turn on one of those C-SPAN hearings, and you watch the Energy Committee, you hear me talking about this issue, you'll hear me talking about a low-carbon economy, because particularly in our part of the world, there are a whole host of renewables that have gotten short shrift. The scientists at MIT say there are enormous opportunities for geothermal power. I think that is a huge Oregon asset. In Klamath Falls, the college is the first college in the world to be completely heated with geothermal power. Hydropower is another resource. And obviously biomass gives us a chance to go in there and thin out those millions and millions of acres of overstocked stands and get the timber to the mills. So again, your question with respect to the royalties clearly has taxpayer ramifications and huge implications for climate change, and I think it sort of dovetails with what the gentleman asked about earlier, is what I've described as how I'm going to try and do it.